Well, thanks for an opportunity to share a message that I am very passionate about. You know the title of it. It's called Finding Your $1 Million Mate. And I'll explain that title as the time goes on tonight. You know, I remember the experience as if it were yesterday. Came home to a note that my father had left for me and my only sibling, an older brother. That note would ultimately impact my life in ways I never could imagine, in very, very dramatic ways. Before I give you the content of the note, let me give you a little background. My father and I were very close. We had a great relationship. It was one of these relationships where we would hug and tell each other that we loved each other. I honestly don't remember of an argument that we had together. Maybe we had them, but we had a great relationship. And I'm telling you, he was the kind of dad that everyone would want to have. I respected him greatly. He was a role model to me religiously and morally. He was respected probably beyond anybody I knew in the community, in the city in which we lived. And truly, others have told me that he had to be the most respected of all. Great relationship, absolutely wonderful, wonderful father. Now, until that particular time in my life, I had not understood what it meant to be rightly related to God. But I did understand that at that point in my life that there would be no decision that I would ever make in my life that would compare in importance, other than some spiritual choices that I would make. There would be no other decision as important as the choice of a spouse. And so as I was a young student just being introduced to what it meant to be rightly related to God, I said, God, I would like to begin praying for my spouse. And so I didn't know how to pray for her exactly. I didn't know what to call her. But I know this, each night I would get down beside my bed and I would kneel and say, God, I don't know who she is, probably. I don't know her name, but wherever she is, whoever she is, I would love for you to bless her right now. I would like for you to protect her. I'd like for you to keep her pure. I'd like for you to guard her. And I would just pray a lot of things for her. Finally, one night I thought, I'm getting tired of just saying whoever she is, whoever she is, whoever she is. I said, she needs a name. So I thought, well, how valuable would a good wife be? And I thought, you know, the largest amount of money I could think of at that stage in my life was $1 million. And I said, well, you know, a good wife would be worth more than any amount of money. And so I began to just call her as a nickname, my $1 million mate. And I would pray and I'd say, God, I don't know where she is, don't know who she is, but would you bless my $1 million mate right now? Would you protect her and would you care for her and so forth and so on? Well, back to the note. When I was summoned home, I was out of town at the time that I needed to come home, that my dad had left a note. And here was the note. I'm gone. You'll never see me again. If you ever have children, if you ever marry and have children, kiss my grandchildren for me. I hate what I'm doing, but I have to do what I have to do. And with that, my dad was gone from my life. And he kept that word nearly 3 decades later when he died. He was out of my life for good. Now, it's interesting. He left on my parents' 25th anniversary. I didn't know growing up that my parents had a broken relationship of any form or fashion. I thought my parents had a very good relationship. I think for most of those years that my mother assumed that things were going pretty good herself. I know this, that he ended up leaving our city with my mother's best friend. And it happened to be my father's best friend's wife. And he was gone. He said, you know, I guess he just said, I can't handle that here. I found something that's more important, and he left town. Well, obviously, my brother and I were very curious to find out where he had gone. It was quite a while until we found the answer, but we did find out where he was, and we made a trip where he was living now. He established a new home, a new medical practice, everything. And I found him, and I remember that conversation when I sat down with him and I said, Dad, explain it to me. You left so much. A beautiful new home, and I mean an outstanding home that he had built. A new dental facility. He was a dentist. He built a whole new facility. It hadn't been open that awfully long. I mean, he left one of the finest sons a father could ever leave. It was my brother. But anyway, he left so much. And I remember asking him, I said, Dad, why did you do it? And his answer was simply this. He said, son, you cannot appreciate this right now. Obviously, I've been married longer than you've been alive. And you need to know this. Things change with time. Those were his words. Things change with time. He said, I loved your mother very much when we first married. We had many years of good life together. But son, you got to know that things just change over years and years. They do change. And I happened to meet someone else that I love more than your mother, and I had to go with my heart. That's all there is. I had to do what I had to do because, and these were the haunting words, things change with time. Now, what really concerned me as I heard that is I immediately thought, I have dated numerous girls up to this time. Through my student years, I had noticed that I would find someone that I was attracted to, and I would spend time with her and enjoy her very much, and then something would happen and the interest would decline, and I'd say, maybe we ought to not be dating anymore. And once that relationship was gone, I felt good, and I thought, great, now I'm free at this point to see if there's another relationship that I would enjoy more. And then I would find perhaps someone else that I was interested in and start dating. And I noticed that those relationships weren't going very long for me. And I had to wonder, my dad lasted 25 years. I've never found someone I've been interested in longer than a period of months, maybe max 1 year. And I thought, what makes me think that it's going to be any different with me than it is with my father? I found a box of letters that my parents had stashed away early in their marriage, and we were cleaning out stuff where my dad had left and came across this box of letters, and I said, what's this? And I began to read them, and they were love letters that my mother had saved between my father and her. And I began to read them. Now, I was dating Carol, who is now my wife. We just started dating, and I began to read, and I cared for Carol quite a bit at that time, but I began to read these letters. And I'm telling you, they made my letters to Carol feel like business memos. It was just like, good gracious, look at, they were syrupy. You know what I'm talking about? They were just dripping with all this, I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you. Well, they were coming out of the same socioeconomic background. They had the same education. They had parents' approvals. They had the age to get married. If you looked at it, they had everything stacked pretty much in their favor. In fact, even religiously, you know what they had done? They'd come to the place, they said, look, when we get married, we're going to make a commitment. We will pray together every night before we go to bed. That's a pretty big commitment. They said, and here's another commitment we'll make. We will never go to bed angry with each other. If ever we're angry, we stay up till we deal with the anger. Pretty mature decision. You would think that if any relationship had a good chance, that one would, and I stood staring at the reality that my parents had divorced at 25 years. And I did not want that to happen with me. In fact, so concerned was I that I said, I have got to start searching for answers. And I wanted to know, what is the meaning of love? How do you know when you're in love and that you've got a love that's going to last? How do you know that when you go into a marriage that you can have a certainty that if things change with time, the change will be for the better, not for the worse? And so I began finding as many godly older people, and when I say older, even in their 80s, I began to ask people who were married that seemed to have very good marriage to say, do you love your wife now? Yes. Do you feel your love is stronger or less? And when I find somebody say, our marriage has gotten better, we love each other more, I'd say, well, tell me, how does it happen? Explain it to me. How do you have that kind of marriage? And I began to take data and information. I would take my observations, and I began to simplify all of this. I said, I've got to simplify it, and so I did. Really boiled it down to 2 observations that I made over about a 5-year period of searching. 2 observations, 2 diagrams and just some variations from those little diagrams and a definition of love. And I'm telling you, in 5 years of that searching, I came to the place after 5 years to say, you know what? I think I know the answer to my questions. In fact, I feel relatively certain that I have the answers to those questions. Now, nearly 3 decades later, I'm telling you, I stand convinced. I know I found the answers to what I was looking for, to have that kind of certainty and that kind of knowledge that I can go into a relationship saying this is a marriage that can last and it's going to get better and better and better. Well, I began to share that with individuals, with groups. And over these nearly 3 decades, I cannot tell you how many times I've taken this message to student groups and single groups all over the country. And every time that I share this message, I'm amazed to see the response. In fact, I love to tell a few stories. I had come up with these little observations and diagrams and was beginning to share them at first with individuals. It was not long after I had finally come to the answers that I was looking for and was in fact still single at that time. I was working at a church, happened to be a singles pastor for a church downtown, a fairly large church, and I was working with all these singles, and we were reaching out, and all these folks were coming in and so forth, and happened to be a man in the church, a very distinguished doctor in the community, and he came to me and he said, I know what you're doing with singles, and I've got a son. This son is a college student. He's a very attractive, very smart kid, but I'll tell you, he's just not spiritually where he needs to be. If you could ever get with him, I can't tell you how much I would appreciate you trying to help him in his spiritual formation, spiritual pilgrimage. I said, hey, I'd love to do it. We'll look for a good opportunity. And so as I often do, I said, is there anything that we might have in common? Something we might, and after a little bit of talk and found out that though we didn't have this in common, we had a same interest. I had been working out for quite a while through the years of college and so forth. I had been accustomed to working out regularly, and he was interested in starting to work out. Father said, you know, he's not in horrible condition, but he's never really exercised much, and certainly no weightlifting or anything. And I know he's been talking about wanting to find somebody that he could have as an accountability partner to help him do it. I said, well, maybe that would be a point of identification. Well, one day I was driving by in the neighborhood where I knew he lived, and I saw the father and son outside together. And so I pulled over, walked up to introduce myself. As we began to talk, the father very smartly said, son, I was talking to Randy the other day and know that he goes down to the gym to work out. Thought, maybe you guys might like to hook up together. No, you've been interested in doing the same thing. And so I said, sure, I'd love to do it. Are you interested? He said, well, yeah, maybe. And you could tell he was a little hesitant, but knowing he knew who I was. And so I said, well, why don't we do this? Let's meet down at the gym at such and such a town. This was a big place. It had swimming pool, it had everything. So we met together, and I'll never forget that first day we met, and you could just almost see him watching me at all times. He'd like look at me, keeping me, directly in front. It was like I was going to spiritually ambush him or something, And I could tell he was uneasy. So I said, listen, I'll call him John. I said, John, are you a little bit uneasy about the fact that, I'm involved in spiritual, ministry, that kind of thing? And he says, quite frankly, I am. I said, you afraid I'm going to spiritually jump you? He goes, yeah, I guess so. And I said, well, I'm going to make a deal with you. Honest. I will never bring up anything spiritual. I won't talk to you about a thing. We'll be here just to become friends and to work out, period. If it ever goes beyond that, it will be because you have invited it. But otherwise, I just won't go there. He says, hey, thanks. I really appreciate that. We had not even really started the workout before he said, by the way, can I ask you a question? I said, sure. He said, now, I know you're, kind of religious type, You work for a church. But he said, now, be honest with me, you have sex, don't you? Now, he knew I was single, and he's asking, do I have premarital sex? And I said, John, I really don't. I never have, never plan to till the day I get married. He goes, yeah, right. Yeah, it's just as wrong to lie as it is to have premarital sex. You know that, don't you? I said, I'm not lying. He said, sure, you're lying. Yeah, I know you do. Come on, tell me. You can just... I said, no, I don't. Well, we start our workout. No sooner had we gotten into our workout that he turns to me. We weren't doing that much, just doing a little weightlifting and all. He said, come on, you do, don't you? I said, do what? The sex thing. I mean, you have sex. Surely you do, don't you? And I said, no. I said, I've never had sex, don't plan to, till the day I get married. Okay? With that, we moved on. We were swimming laps. Now, let me tell you, this guy was out of shape. He was out of shape. I am way ahead of him. I come to the end of the lap. I'm waiting there for him, and he is just chugging along, and I'm thinking, will he make it? You would think he's just thinking survival at the moment. He grabs the end. He's hanging on, head above water, and he looks at me and he says, you do, don't you? I said, are you still thinking about the sex thing? He said, yeah, you do, don't you? I said, no, I don't. And I never plan to till the day we get married. Drop it. Well, then we go to the sauna. You know what a sauna is, right? Saunas were, I think God allowed man to create such just to give us a little taste of what hell's going to be like, So we're sitting in there, just wrapped in towels, just trying to survive. And I'm doing a lot better than him. I mean, it is hot and uncomfortable. We're sitting in the middle of this, and he turns to me and he goes, you do, don't you? With that, I said, enough. I said, do you want to know why I don't? Now, I have to be honest with you. If I answer your question, I'm going to have to dip into some spiritual things. But your call. If you want me to, I will. If not, you just call me off. But if you want to know, I'll be happy to tell you. Well, his curiosity, he just couldn't handle it. He said, no, I want to hear. So we pulled out of the sauna. We go over to a couple of chairs, and now you can imagine we're just, sweat dripping, and I get a piece of paper, and all I can find is a pen. And so the sweat dripping on the pen work is just going everywhere. It's just a mess. But I draw out a couple of diagrams, make the few observations, show them a couple of diagrams, and then I finished and I said, that's why I've never had sex and never plan to the day we get married. And with that, I took the paper, and I remember it was just so messy. I said, I got to throw this away. And I grabbed it to crunch it up, to throw it away. About the time he goes, oh, stop. I said, what? He said, I want that piece of paper. I said, you do? Why? He said, well, I want to be able to explain to other people what we believe. I said, we believe? Have you got a mouse in your pocket? What are you talking about? Who is we? He said, what you and I believe. I said, you believe this? He said, let me tell you, that's what you have because you're a Christian. I'm interested to hear more. Do you know what? The door from that day on, wide open to any spiritual discussion. In fact, he wanted to pursue it because he said, man, you've got something that I didn't realize. That's why. I remember a girl that was just engaged. About that same time, she'd become engaged to a fairly notorious guy in the community because of his evil deeds and wickedness, and I'm not going to tell you what some of the things he was involved in. But you think of bad, and then put it to about the second or third exponent because this guy was bad. I knew this girl's parents, and it happened to be that we had an opportunity to have a discussion one night. I said, here you just got engaged. She had a rock on her hand. I mean, a big diamond. I said, you just got engaged. She said, yeah, we're getting married such and such. I said, can I share a couple of quick diagrams with you and just kind of walk through a few observations that I've made that you might find to be interested as you think about marriage? And she goes, yeah. She had no thought in her mind of anything but marrying this guy. Within a few weeks, she broke the engagement. She said, you know what? I didn't realize that there was something as different than what I found in the pursuit of a relationship. Now, what I like to do is maybe just share one group experience. I had an invitation not too awfully long ago to the University of Georgia. One of the girls in one of the sororities called me and said, I've heard this talk called the Finding Your $1 Million Mate. Would you be willing to come to our sorority? I think I can get all the girls to hang around. It's a very popular sorority, a very well-known one. And I said, well, be happy to do that if you think they'd really hang around and listen. And so they had their chapter meeting, and afterwards I walk in, and here the place is packed wall to wall with girls. And they said, now we've got a volunteer thing. If you want to leave, you can, but it's going to be talking about finding your $1 million mate. You know, not one girl moved. Every girl sat there, and I got up and I gave the talk of the $1 million mate. And when I finished, I was amazed at the response. I shouldn't have been based on how many times I'd given it, but boy, they were just buzzing about it and talking. And I can no more than get home, literally. I get home, the phone rings. Somebody says, I'm in such and such a sorority. I just heard what you did at such and such a sorority, and would you come to ours next week? I would love to have you share. I think I can get our girls to hang around. I'd love for them to hear that too. Sure. Did that. Next week or two, another phone call. I don't know how many sororities I ended up going to over the course of that year. But the response that I got and continue to get from this is, you know what? I didn't realize there is something more to finding the right mate than what most of us think.